Hello again, my friends. Well, I've just had the privilege of making a very good, beautiful 6-day retreat. And one of the starting points of the retreat was a wonderful quote from our retreat master, which goes, "Hope sends us dancing around dark corners, seeking a tomorrow we cannot see for ourselves." That's beautiful, isn't it? Hope sends us dancing around dark corners. And that's a wonderful way to begin our talk today, because we're talking about faith in action. To me, that's almost a no-brainer. There's no point in having faith if we don't action it. As I see it, no point at all. In fact, if we go back to the early church, before Christ's presence in our world, the ancient Jews had faith, but they didn't so much have the action, because it took Christ's presence in our world to introduce the whole idea of relationships, because faith is relationships. That's what it's all about. And if I have a relationship with Christ, my love and my Lord, then I have to action that. I've got to go out for people. I need to take him to the dark corners of people's lives and bring him alive for them and for myself. To do otherwise is a faith that is desiccated, is dried up and useless. There's a story told of a preacher who was saying something like this. He was proclaiming from the pulpit that we need to go out and be there for others, especially into the dark corners of their lives. Bring them to life, bring them to resurrection, to use his words. And a heckler from the congregation stood up and said, "When have you brought anyone to life?" And the preacher looked at him calmly, stopped for a few seconds, and then said, "Every time I sit with somebody who is dying, I bring them to life in their soul. Every time I give a kind hand to somebody going across the street, I bring them to life for a moment. Every time I look at someone who's ragged and unkempt and say, 'Hi, bro,' or whatever the words might be, I bring them to life for a second." In other words, I could go on like this for lots of scenarios, but you've got the message. Every time we are there for somebody else, we are bringing them to life. And whether we consciously realise it, remember it or not, we're actually living our faith. We are doing faith in action. It's not, in other words, it's not difficult, is it? It's just our everyday stuff. But we can make it more meaningful, perhaps, if we keep that in mind. Jesus, our loving Lord, lived zestfully. Wonderful word, isn't it? He lived zestfully. We need to do the same. He went through the horror of death, an appalling death, and came to resurrection. And because of that, he's promised us resurrection. So we need to bring the hope of resurrection to those around us all the time. Another word that our retreat guide mentioned was that we need to practice resurrection every day. I liked that. Practice resurrection, yeah. Practice the fullness of life for ourselves and everyone around us. To live zestfully, to be there for others. We've talked in the past, and perhaps I could just mention a couple of little things again. It's the ability, I think, to recognise my own needs and be prepared to go to some lengths to meet them when and as that's appropriate. But more importantly, to look out and to be able to meet the needs of those around me. And that's not always easy. I went this morning in the bus in the bus to the hospital to one of our other residents here who was very unwell, and when I got to the hospital and visited her, she was almost in too bad a shape to recognise my visit. Was it a waste of time? No, not at all. She will gain something because I brought her in my heart, the risen Lord. So my friends, I'll just repeat, hope sends us dancing around dark corners, and hope is a virtue. It's not that Pollyanna, everything will be okay, nothing's ever going to go wrong, go wrong, go wrong. It's not like that at all. Hope is a theological virtue. Hope is Christ in my heart. And one last comment that also came out of my retreat was that in the feast days of the church, particularly the feast days of Mary, Christ's mother, but also of the saints, the people we honour, we have footprints, and we can walk in their footprints and find from them, learn from them little ways of bringing the hope that we're talking about into people's lives and hearts. Thank you so much for being with me today. We'll talk again soon. Go well and go with your God.